It'd be a privilege to have my heart broken by you.
Okay, so let's talk about what it means to be dateable. Whether you're dating now, or you've dated before, or you've never dated at all, we want to equip you with some tools from God's Word to make sure that when you do step into dating, you don't make a complete mess of it all.
I like your sleeves. They're real big.
Thank you.
Well, there's this one girl that I've had a crush on forever.
We're getting married. We are getting married.
Who?
I want a baby now. I'm 37. It's too much for a first date, isn't it? I said too much.
I promise to never forget that this is a once-in-a-lifetime love.
We want you to enjoy the process of moving toward marriage. And we know that dating or courting or whatever you want to call it will be a part of that journey.
The you are now is the same you I was in love with yesterday, the same you I'll be in love with tomorrow.
Ultimately, when it comes to when you start dating, we believe that your parents are the best people to help you know when it is right for you to begin. After all, they know you best, and whether you know it or not, their wisdom and guidance is usually worth following. No matter when you begin, we want to help you now to prepare God's way to become dateable. Have you ever had a cold that got so bad you ended up totally losing your voice? Like at first, maybe your throat was just scratchy, and then like after a while it started to ache, and then after a couple of days, you couldn't communicate or talk at all. Maybe you tried to speak, but it was like the volume button was on mute. If you've ever had that happen to you, you know how frustrating it can be. And if not, just like use your imagination. Think about it. How are you supposed to order food through the drive-thru, or yell to your mom downstairs that you're almost ready for school, or scream at your video game controller when you get frustrated? Now, a couple of years ago, I had a polyp in my vocal cords. It's like nodes, but just not quite as bad. Now, it was bad enough that it caused me to lose my voice like all the time. And a lot of times it was like mid-sentence. Now, as a pastor, a huge part of my job is using my voice. So I had to take care of this, and I had to get surgery on my vocal cords. Now, I think I make hospital attire look good, but anyway, after I got surgery and I got the swanky hairnet and hospital gown off, I had to be on vocal rest for 10 days. You guys know how much I love to talk. That was a struggle. When you don't have a voice, you start to notice how much you need it. Your ability to communicate just tanks. The worst part is you can't make jokes. I remember thinking of so many jokes. My friends would be talking and I would try to write them down on an iPad, but by the time I wrote the joke, the moment had completely passed. There's nothing worse than an ill-timed joke, and that's pretty much all I could make. The point is, when you can't communicate, and your quality of life and even your relationships suffer. This is also true in dating. If you want a surefire way to be an undateable person, then don't learn to communicate with people. But being dateable requires more than just having a voice. It's about learning how to use your voice. In order to be someone who's dateable, you have to learn how to be someone who understands how to talk and listen with another human being. You have to know the right things to say, and you have to know the right time to say those things, and you have to know the wrong things to say and when to avoid saying those things. I'm not saying you have to learn how to communicate perfectly, but without question, if you're not at least working on your ability to talk with other people, the possibility of you having a successful dating relationship will decrease dramatically. Now, none of us want to be a person who has no idea what to say to someone on a date. And no one wants to be the kind of person who says the wrong thing on a date, something dumb like, "You're almost as attractive as the last person I went on a date with." That's a bad idea, okay? If we want to become dateable, we have to be good at communicating the right things and also communicating them in the right way. Now, these days, there are about 1 million ways to communicate. Let's say you see someone you're interested in at the school. Now, thanks to texting, Snapchat, Instagram, about a dozen other social media apps that I'm too old to understand, you can find and communicate with that person within a couple of minutes, no problem. But it wasn't too long ago that type of communication was impossible. See, not that long ago, if you wanted to talk to someone you liked, you had to pick up a phone in your house and call a phone at their house. The worst part was that most of the time their mom or dad would answer. And then it's all like, "Can I talk to Ashley on the phone?" And then they're like, "Who's calling?" And then you like froze in terror, like, "What do I do?" And you like want to hang up the phone and just die inside. But of course, no, you can't do that. You had to talk to her dad. This conversation was like never casual, right? Sometimes the dad would even decide he didn't want you to talk on the phone with his daughter. And really, come on, who can blame him? That was his decision. Now, when you called the girl's house, that scenario was just part of the risk. If you could gain the courage to do it and try to speak with them, maybe their parents would allow it, but if they weren't at home, you went through all of that for nothing. You couldn't talk to them. You just had to like leave a message and wait for hours until they returned. I know, the 90s sound terrible. They pretty much were. It all sounds super inconvenient. Generally, this sounds pretty miserable. So you can go ahead and thank technology for bailing you out of that nightmarish scenario. In many ways, our communication advances have been a huge help. I, for one, am glad that you can text someone something like, "Hey, what time are you coming over?" instead of calling and having to go through all the formality. But for all the good technology has done, in some ways, it's making us less dateable. Because with all the speed technology offers, it bypasses some of the basics of communication, like being able to talk with people face to face. And when it comes to dating, communicating face to face, that's key. If we forget how to do that, we eventually forget how to have real relationships. But face-to-face communication can be difficult. In face-to-face communication, you don't always have the time to think of what to say in any given moment. Have you ever walked away from a conversation when someone made fun of you, but you think of that perfect comeback hours later? That's one reason texting is easier than face-to-face communication. Talking over text means you can edit yourself. And for the socially awkward among us, technology is like a personality boost. We can plan what we want to say in a text and come up with the perfect response and be funnier or smarter. And we can take our time planning it. We can delete the bad. We can make ourselves seem compassionate and caring or mysterious and distant. We have time and space to make sure we're putting forward the best version of ourselves, or even worse, we can project someone that we're not. And then there's lobbing. I'm referring to like when you lob something out there to see what response you get. See, you can text something, and if you get a negative response, you can be like, "Oh, I didn't mean to say it like that." Because there's no tone in texting and you don't have to look someone in the eye, communicating over text seems far less risky. It's easy to see why you would do it that way. I mean, technology lets us enjoy the benefit of a relationship with a lot fewer risks. But if you're honest, you probably don't want your relationships to only exist on your phone. I mean, at some point, you want to be in a real place with a real person and maybe even on a real date. In dating relationships, I'm talking about real ones, and they can be demanding. They're risky. And they can only work when you can truly be yourself. They can only truly work when someone can see that you're messy and awkward, and yet they like you anyway. I mean, relationships involve people who sometimes say really dumb things. Real relationships involve human beings who sometimes hurt each other's feelings. But you know what makes a relationship real? having to look someone in the eye and apologize. See, in these types of conversations, you learn way more about someone than you could possibly learn about them over text. Can it be difficult? Absolutely. But learning how to do it will set you up for success in all of your relationships. It will definitely make you more dateable. Relationships that exist only through technology don't allow these types of things to happen. You don't want a relationship where you feel like you have to project an image of yourself in order to be accepted by the other person. So the question is, how can we move forward in all of our relationships with the right balance of technology and real communication? And believe it or not, this idea is actually in the Bible. No, the Bible doesn't talk about texting or Kik or Snapchat specifically, but it does talk about the importance of face-to-face communication. The Apostle John addressed this very idea. In one of the letters found in the Bible, John wrote to either an individual or a group of people, like a church, that he cared about. Now, the purpose of this letter was love. As hard as it is to believe, letter writing was actually the latest technology back then. And not only that, it was how new Christians encouraged each other in their faith. It's how they checked in with each other and stayed current on what they were dealing with. Here's what John says in chapter 1. I have much to write to you, but I do not want to use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to visit you and talk with you face to face, that our joy may be complete. It's 1 John 1:12. See, John was using the hottest technology, paper and ink. But he knew that some conversations had to be saved for that in-person moment. He said that his joy would be complete when they were face to face. It wasn't that he didn't have anything more to say. I mean, he did, but he wanted to do it the right way, eye to eye. Simply put, there's a place for face to face. Think of it this way. God gave us the ultimate example of the value of being face to face. He could have just sent us letters filled with his wisdom, grace, love, and mercy. But in order for humans like us to really get what God was like, he sent his son, Jesus. God with sandals and skin on. God knew that real face-to-face conversations would mean more to us than words on a page. Talking eye to eye may not seem like that big of a deal, but when we do and say things in person, it matters. It makes a difference. It changes what you say and how you say it. Relationships are strengthened. Friendships are deepened. People are affected. You become a more real and honest person. And there's a place for face-to-face. And yeah, it makes you more dateable. Now, we live in a world that depends totally on technology. And let's face it, technology can enable us to miss out on developing real relationships. So how do we become people who can have real live conversations with real living people? Here are a few tips. And these tips will be helpful in all of our relationships, not just our dating relationships. First, be present. When you're there, be all there. When you go on a date, be on the date. If you're just hanging out with friends, man, be attentive. I'm not saying you can't ever check your texts. You definitely should respond if your mom or your dad texts you, trust me. But I'm just saying, when you're with someone, make a decision to be really there. Like, pay attention to people. Stop checking Instagram or texting someone who isn't there. Man, ask real questions and then listen to the answers. When you do that, you're letting someone know that they actually matter to you, that they're important. There's a great way to treat someone, whether you're dating or not. Second, man, be brave. Now, this may be the most difficult thing to do. It's easier to keep doing things the way you currently do them. A brave approach is to have all tough or awkward or risky conversations, not over text, but in person. When you do ask someone to go on a date with you, man, ask them in person. Look them in the eye. And if you ever have to break up with someone, man, don't hide behind text, ever. Be brave enough to tell them in person. It's actually far more loving to tell them the truth and even potentially hurt their feelings in person than to let them read it in a text. Now, why do I say this? Because there's a place for face-to-face, just like the Apostle John said. Loving your neighbor as yourself like we talked about last week, is being willing to have difficult and honest conversations in person. It'll make you better and stronger, and it'll set you up for better relationships for the rest of your life. Listen, I get it. Thou shalt not break up over text. It's not in the Bible. But we can learn now from what was written back then. And what is in the Bible is a clear message that God wants us to treat and speak to other people in the kindest and most loving way possible. And in my opinion, and I think Apostle John's as well, there's a place for face-to-face. So listen, texting isn't inherently bad. Neither is Snapchatting or Instagramming or whatever app you use. They can be used for bad things, but they're not inherently bad. However, we all have to be careful not to let the virtual world replace real world relationships. I mean, real relationships, they can be messy, but being messy is what makes them real. So if you want to be dateable, if you want to be good at relationships in general, remember, there's a place for face to face. Remember, there's a place for face to face. Wait, hold on. I got a text. Just respond real quick. Wait, what was I saying? Probably gonna Snapchat. Hold on, let me snap that. Ooh. Hey girl, your mama let you date? Hey girl, what are you up to? 'Cause I got nothing going. What was I saying? There's a place for something. I don't remember. Oh my gosh, I'm so funny. Okay.